Oh. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Elizabeth Halliday, and today I'll be joined by Sebastian Stodolak. Let's get right in. I'd like to
Hello.
share my screen. Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This meeting is being sponsored by the Climate and Freedom International Coalition. It's an online presentation of the European energy sector held during Climate Week NYC 2024. Today is September 27th, and it's being brought to you from New York City and Warsaw, Poland. Our guest today is from the Warsaw Enterprise Institute. The Climate and Freedom International Coalition is a program of the Grace Richardson Fund. You'll hear a little bit about that later. And Climate Week NYC is convened by the Climate Group, and its chair is our friend and colleague, former Colorado Governor Bill Ritter. Thanks very much for all the work you do in the sector. Our agenda today is welcome, introduction to the participants, myself, founding member of the coalition, and Sebastian Stodolak. The topic today will be energizing the energy sector in Central and Eastern Europe, with a special focus on removing barriers for private investment in energy. We'll have a little discussion and recommendations, and at the end, have some contact info so that you can follow up. As I mentioned, the Climate and Freedom International Coalition is a program of the Grace Richardson Fund. GRF is dedicated to pioneering free market solutions to 21st century challenges, chief among them addressing climate change. The Climate and Freedom International Coalition supports free market climate policy by providing a forum to freely discuss ideas with a wide range of experts. The coalition has monthly online meetings facilitated by the Tholos Foundation. At the end of this presentation, we'll show you how to attend. Advanced registration for those meetings is required, and Chatham House rules are observed. Yet we also host ad hoc events like this one, as well as in-person meetings to publicize our research or to convene public policy workshops. We participated in Climate Week, National Clean Energy Week, the COP process, and Earth Day, run by our friend and colleague Trammell Crow down in Dallas. Look for EarthX right around Earth Day, April 22nd, annually. Our guest, Sebastian Stodolak, is vice president at the Warsaw Enterprise Institute. In addition to being a VP there, Seb is an economic columnist for Dziennik Gazeta Prawna.
Perfect pronunciation, yeah.
Publishes articles for national and international news outlets and hosts a radio show about entrepreneurship. He has a degree in philosophy from the University of Warsaw and has engaged in postgraduate studies in finance and economic policy at the Polish Academy of Sciences. He's won multiple awards for his work on monetary policy, including the 2017, help me out.
Yeah, it was a prize from our central bank, actually. For some interview
What's
I
the
did.
Word? What's the word? Krzysztof Dzierżawski prize?
Yeah, Krzysztof Dzierżawski. Yeah, this is the other prize I got. Yeah, it's for freedom of speech and free market ideas that I promote. The prize is being distributed to people of that kind. Yeah.
Perfect. And it was awarded by the central bank and also the Adam Smith Center for Promoting Freedom and Common Sense. He's also the lead singer of a heavy metal band, Screammaker, with whom he has released 3 albums and played more than 300 shows, including 6 tours of China. So in addition to being very smart about economic policy, Sebastian's also incredibly cool. We're very pleased. We're very pleased that he's with me now. And I'm trying to stop sharing. My cursor will come back. Very good. So welcome. You know, I have to say, since we have a focus on climate change right now, during the time of this recording, there's been a lot of flooding over in your part of the world. Right at the top of the hour, could you tell us what's happening there and what's being done?
Yeah, of course. So there's a huge crisis in the Central Europe, especially when it comes to Poland, in the southwestern part of Poland and the northern part of Czechia, for example. We got some flooding due to heavy rains that fell recently. And yeah, and basically, what this situation teaches us is that we need to adapt rather to try to prevent climate change. What's been neglected is adaptation. And we should have invested much more into some safety measures to prevent flooding. We did have big floods back in the day, like 20 something years ago, and it seems like we didn't draw correct lessons out of it. I think that all the policies that were put in place, environmental policies around climate issues, were misguided, and they distracted our policymakers from doing the right thing. So yeah, this is a serious stuff. People have died, people lost their homes. It looks like after a war, a bombing, a shelling, it's a disaster, a real disaster. And it's not a natural phenomenon, to be honest. It's a natural phenomenon plus human incapability to predict what's predictable in that case. Flooding happen from time to time, right?
You know, that is a great segue about what we need to do and the kind of new policies and new actions that need to be taken. So well, you're here today to talk about the energy sector, and a lot of this stuff is related. So let's jump right into it. Do you have anything? Do you have a presentation for us?
Yeah, I do. I need
Oh,
to.
I think I might have it.
Maybe it will be easier if you would share the
Yeah.
presentation.
Can we see this?
Yeah, I need to open that thing.
No, I have it.
If you have it, just open that up, please. We're gonna
It should be
follow
on the
that one.
screen.
Yeah, it is. It's there. Yeah, so how we do it? I follow your questions or should
Sure.
I?
Well, here,
Yeah.
so here, this is the topic. Now, it looks like it's very beautiful. Thank you so much. Energizing the energy sector in Central Eastern Europe. This is topic of the hour, especially since they too are on the front lines of climate change. It's not what one would typically associate with a small island nation, but no place on Earth is untouched by the weather. So Sebastian, let's jump right in. The study was prepared by the Warsaw Enterprise Institute, but it looks like you had some co-authors too. Tell us a little bit about the process.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, the starting point of our research was the recognition that there is a conflicting interest between Central Eastern Europe, European Union members, and the Western countries in the European Union. The conflict is basically because they've already adjusted or almost adjusted their economies to the climate targets. And we, countries of the Central and Eastern Europe, we are burdened by our history, by our heritage. And the heritage here is communism that we had to live through. And it left us with malfunctioning, not adapted, old style energy system. So it's much harder for us to keep up with European Union climate targets. So we are not in the same position as the Western European countries. So that was the basic starting point of our research, and that's why we engaged so many European think tanks from our region. So we collaborated with think tanks from Romania, from Bulgaria, from Czechia, from Slovakia, from Ukraine. And yeah, in total, 7 countries were engaged into preparing this report. Plus, also we engaged some legal experts that helped us with understanding European Union's law. We also engage into consultation process some industry representatives from different branches of energy sector. So it is not a report commissioned by some specific interest group. We got both people from wind industry and nuclear and solar, and we have people who are developing the heat to our homes in Poland and Europe. So yeah, so we really try to listen to the voices of many in order to understand what's the problem with the private investing into energy sector. And the starting point, coming back to this original remark, when it comes to the targets, you can see in this chart that we have to reduce our emission, but by significant amounts. The toughest challenge, it might seem, is faced by the Western countries. You can take a look at Sweden, Germany, and Denmark. They need to reduce their dependence on coal and so on in order to reduce emissions by factor of 50%. But it's just a superficial thing. Like I said before, it is very easy for France to reduce their carbon footprint since their base over 70% of their energy production on nuclear, which is zero emission technology. In contrast to that, Poland, for example, have to reduce our emissions only by around 18%, but 18% in a country that is taking almost 80% of its all energy from fossil fuels. It's really a very ambitious goal. You can see Czechia is in the similar position. Bulgaria is also not so easy. Romania, not so easy. The best situation is in Slovakia, that is a small country. So it's easy to provide energy with few nuclear reactors. And indeed, they do produce most of their energy from nuclear, and just tiny fraction is produced from fossil fuels, and the rest is produced by renewables. So yeah, so the countries differ, but then the barriers. You can think like, for example, if we have different energy systems in Central Europe, we can somehow connect them. So, for example, if Poland is producing so much energy from fossil fuel, it might be wise to connect our system to Slovakia, that maybe can export to us green energy. Is it possible? Theoretically, everything is possible, but technically, not in Central Eastern Europe. We have very limited capacities when it comes to selling energy cross borders. So this is one of the constraints put on the development of the sector, because obviously if you cannot connect your business with other countries, you cannot scale it up. And if you can scale it up, you won't invest into it, because it just have no future. It has no future. On the previous slide that you showed, this is the other obstacle on the growth of private actors in Central European energy markets, is the presence of the state ownership. This is actually quite old chart. The data is from 2014, as you see, but sadly, nobody did a newer, updated research on that. It takes a lot of work. So we have only that at our disposal. You can see that most of the countries in question have more than 40% of public of the state-owned enterprises generating power in the total of the power capacity of a given country. And since the last 10 years, the trend was negative. So when it comes to the private sector, it was negative. So we had more and more state entities engaging into energy production. For example, in Poland, right now, we have 70% of energy produced by the state entities. 70 is produced, distributed also to a big degree by state-owned entities. So we can switch to the next slide.
Does Poland, why is there no nuclear in Poland?
Well, this is a history speaking here. So right after the Second World War, we had and we've been a victim of Soviet central planning, and they just didn't plan it for us. And since they did not plan nuclear for Poland, they planned nuclear for Ukraine, they planned nuclear for Bulgaria, not for Poland. So since they did not do it, they planned coal. We had a lot of coal mines in Poland, so they developed those coal mines. And we are basically, burdened by this heritage, Soviet style industry installed in Poland in the early 50s and then 60s.
So, I guess it really
yeah.
takes a long time to outgrow some of those entrenched systems and move on to have something new. Maybe we'll get to that at the end. So we have a lot of state ownership, even if it's old data, it still is in existence, just even as you're mentioning now. And some of these barriers, limited access to the grid and land, regime uncertainty and revenue constraints, what you just mentioned, you can't sell to your neighbors. Everybody has to maintain their own grid, their own system, and they can't load share, they can't sell. It's not a recipe for growth.
That's not a recipe for growth, definitely. So as you can see, we identified 7 kinds of barriers on the way to private capital, but we identified 40 specific barriers within those categories, and we listed specifically for each country the legal acts that are responsible for creating those barriers. And we also formulated a proposal to get rid of them. That would be a huge legislative challenge for all of those countries, obviously, because many of those barriers are there for a reason. So let's go back to this lack of interconnectors in between countries. Why do we lack it? And the reason is simple. If you open the borders for energy trade, if you make a common energy market for Europe, like a real energy market, then all your national power entities will be stripped of the privilege of running the whole country. They will have to face the competition. And they don't want to compete. They want to be privileged. They want to be working in the favorable circumstances created by this lack of interconnectedness. So this is one of many examples of the barriers that is not easily changeable, though it would seem from outside that why not? Why not to build more of the interconnectors? If a private, maybe this is something I learned recently, because we have in Poland this problem with nuclear, as you mentioned. We don't have it, and we want to have it. We want to have it, and there are already plans to build big nuclear in Poland, but also there are plans to build small nuclear reactors in Poland. These plans were initiated by private entrepreneur. So the story is like that. He wanted to build it for his own factories, and then state somehow learned about his plans and offer him a deal that he cannot refuse. So we're gonna make it with you because, you know, we are the state, we are very important. So he needed to form a joint venture with the state. Then the government changed. Once the government changed, the new prime minister said, this project is done with the former politicians, with the former government. We don't like the former government. So anything associated with the former power, former government, need to be put on hold. That's why actually there is nothing going on when it comes to small nuclear reactors right now in Poland. But I asked the people who are doing this SMRs in Poland, why don't you build an SMR in Slovakia and then export the energy to Poland? You can build your own interconnector. You can, on your own, connect our grids and sell it back to Poland from Slovakia. It'll be a compromise for the government will be ridiculed by such a move, obviously, but you can do it. They said, no, we can't, because the former government, in order to prevent such a scenario, legislated a ban on private entrepreneurs building private interconnectors. So that's how it works, you know. It's very hard to convince legislators to change anything because they have vested interest in keeping things as they are.
Well, you know, not all hope is lost, but regime uncertainty, one administration can undo the other. Revenue constraints, you can't build it if you can't sell it. You don't have access to the grid. It's not big enough to support the kind of redevelopment of the infrastructure that you need. Limited access to land, maybe at the place where you want to build that factory. Building in Slovakia would be easier if Poland has the demand, but you're prevented by doing that by multiple forms of bureaucracy and state control. And we didn't even get into high and complicated taxes, which, if this is just the basis, you can just imagine what the tax overlay is. But let's move on. I think there is some ray of hope. I know that you put that markets work in spite of some of these barriers. Can we talk a little bit about how the private sector is actually making some inroads?
Of course. So yes, indeed, as you can see in this chart, the blue part is signaling the level of private investments. And you see in the total amount of money invested in that case, renewable energy, it's around 70%. It's circulating around this share. You can see 2016, we had even 88%. I don't know the reason of this fluctuation, but anyway, it's pretty high. So the share of the money invested in renewables is pretty high. Then you have the public money being pumped into the system. So yeah, that is a ray of hope, that there is some private money flooding into this sector. But also you need to remember that much of this money is induced by public subsidies. So when it comes to wind or solar energy, it's been heavily subsidized. That's why many companies were created in order to grab a part of those subsidies for themselves. Obviously, some of those companies right now, they don't need more subsidies. They can operate on their own, and they are in favor of free markets. But we have to remember that there was no real market clearing in this sector because the rules are distorted. So this is a very important part of our recommendations. That it's not only a matter.
What does the ETS stand for? This is your number one. That's a European trading system?
Yeah. It's a European trading system. Of course, it's the system to trade with the emissions allowances. So basically, the state creates some amount of permits to emit CO2, and the industry is trading those permits. The money that is being extracted from them is going to the central budget of each state, and the state then redistributes this money among the players according to the guidelines created within the climate policy framework. It's a complicated mechanism, and it's some people say, well, it's a market mechanism because it's based on trade. Well, I allow me to remember to remind everybody who's saying that you know, back in the day we had slave trade. And is a slave trade a free market mechanism? Obviously it is, but is it a free market for everybody? No. So when we mean free market, we mean something created naturally, based on some universal rules, no discrimination against the player and so on, the players and so on, so on. So yeah, well, this is just, I would say, a big misinterpretation of ETS. It's not a free market system. It's an artificial system created by bureaucrats, and it distorts the market signals, when it comes to energy. That's why we need to phase it out. We need to phase it out and then switch it and replace it with the proposals from the CFA, from Climate Freedom Accord. And there
Perfect.
is, there is much more of those distorting tools that are being implemented these days. I think that ETS is not the worst of them. I think the worst of them are the subsidies, because the subsidies and the mandates, meaning some privileges given to specific companies, are really changing the rules of the game in the direction we don't want. This is just simply picking winners and losers by bureaucrats who have no idea what technology will be useful in the future, but they think that they know. That's a big problem. They think that they know. So yeah, so if we went back 120 years from now, and if we allowed that kind of policy to be implemented, we would be subsidizing horses instead of cars. So it's not a good thing to do.
Right. And
But the thing is, yeah.
You mentioned stopping the CBAM implementation. Can you describe that a little bit? A lot of people say it's really great.
Well, it's a very, very bad idea. Basically, it's a tariff. It's a tariff. I know that people in Brussels, they don't want to call it tariff. They say it's not a tariff. It's just kind of a compensation mechanism put in place in order to stop carbon leakage. The carbon leakage concept is simple. When we have ETS, some companies don't want to be producing their goods under this mechanism, so they just export production to other countries outside of Europe, and then they re-import the products to Europe again. So this is called carbon leakage, because we do not get rid of emissions, we don't reduce emissions, we just relocate them to other countries. So CBAM is about to prevent that. Well, I don't know, maybe it will not prevent this. What it will do for sure is it will increase prices in Europe, as every tariff does. It's increasing prices by reducing competition. And with that, we're going to be poorer. It'll be much harder to fight with climate change or to care for the environment, because we all know that the richer we are, the more self-conscious we are, and the more willing we are to help everything around us, not only environment, people also. So CBAM is just a bad idea.
You have some recommendations, right? I mean, it seems like starting with the mutual trade, if you want to phase out a coal plant in Poland, you could build a nuclear in Slovakia and put a transmission line there.
Yeah, I don't have resources to do it myself.
I know. Well, we'll all get there. Let's move on to some recommendations.
Yeah, so what we want to do is having this recognition, this fundamental recognition in mind that the interests of the Central European countries are different than the interests of the Western European countries, especially under the current climate policy umbrella. We need to think how to respond to it. I think it's highly unlikely that Brussels will change their minds and they will say, well, you are right. We need to go back to free markets, get rid of ETS, CBAM, and so on. We need to fight for it. We need to make them realize that they are wrong, but it's highly unlikely that they will do it anytime soon, if ever.
We went to.
So what we want to do is to use the steering wheel that is still in hands of the nation states in Europe, because we still have a lot of sovereignty to create our own legal systems and regulatory frameworks and public policies. Since those are also misguided, designed in a wrong way, we need to make some fixes and some fine-tuning. And the idea is to do it together, to set set optimal and as low as possible levels of already existing taxes, so that they are as close to each other as possible. So harmonizing taxation at the lowest possible level when it comes to taxes. The same thing with regulations. We need to harmonize regulations. So if you are establishing a company in Poland, you could be sure that everything else staying the same, you can go with your products and you can build your factory and sell your products in Czechia, in Romania, and Bulgaria as well. So you will not be faced with the necessity to comply with their local different requirements. That's how we'd like to create this big special economic zone, so to speak, for over 110 million people in this part of Europe.
It seems like that's part of what the EU was all about, creating a large common market.
Yeah, but this is the problem. This is the ideal that they were striving for. But in reality, it seems that they stuck because the interests of particular countries started to matter more than that common market. And actually, these are not the interests of countries. These are the interests of particular lobbyists who have the biggest impact on their respective policymakers. So it's easy to make this mistake and think of a national economy as a whole. So then if we treat our economies as entities, we tend to use this word that our economies compete with each other. And if our economies compete with each other, we need to design national industrial strategies for them to outcompete others. Obviously, this is a very nice narrative for the strongest lobbyists in the room, because the industry policy, when it's designed, it has to favor one industries over other. Otherwise, it would be not the industrial policy. That's the essence of it. So so we need to get rid of that wrong kind of thinking. We have economies, obviously, but we have different players, different companies competing with each other. States are there to design the rules of the game, not to tell where should we strike the goal. This is up for market to decide.
So they pick the rules of the game, not pick the winner of the game.
Precisely.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, what's next? Are you taking this anywhere? Socializing it?
Yeah. Once we published it, we obviously refer to this report by every occasion we can. Recently, I was attending a big forum conference in Poland, in Krynica, with some of the representatives of Polish government, of a climate ministry, and the vice minister was attending the same panel that I. And actually, he seemed to be very much in favor of deregulation, of setting barriers as low as possible, of shortening the permitting processes. The permitting is one big obstacle in every kind of business, not only energy.
Permitting reform
So
is a
that's a
huge
good
issue
thing.
over here too, yes.
Yeah. So this is a good thing. But the problem is that, you cannot really change the minds of the ruling class overnight. It is a process, and there needs to be a lot of actors engaged, and they need to attack policymakers with data, with reports, not only with high talk that we libertarians like to conduct or engaged into. It's for us, it's so obvious. Everything is so obvious. You've been attending many free market conferences. For everybody, everything is so obvious, right? We need to understand that for the people outside, it is not obvious that market will deliver the goods every time asked. So maybe this is a thing to remember.
Well, so we have our work cut out for us. Well, thank you so much. This has been really beautiful. And it looks like there's so many parallels, no matter where we are in the world, energy is top of mind. And we're remaking permitting reform. I mean, I think entrenched interests are really dominating the conversation in many places. Some people favor different technologies, but solar and wind may not be ideal in all kinds of geographies. Sometimes taking the risk off of these new technologies like nuclear or SMR or fusion or even geothermal is having a day in the sun. And we want to be able to move those things forward. So perhaps we'll be able to share some interest on permitting reform over here, a bill put forward by Senator Manchin and his other co-sponsors. We'll be able to see if that makes any headway in our legislation, and perhaps that can help to serve in the figuring out the compensation or the system for how to harmonize regulations over in your part of the world, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It seems unusual that Germany cut off the 1.0 emission form of energy, especially when just at the COP process last year, a tripling of the nuclear fleet worldwide was one of the major initiatives. So perhaps Poland will get its nuclear reactor after all.
Hopefully, and hopefully it will be private, because I have to tell you, that's a curious thing, an interesting thing. We have the plans to build the big nuclear. Obviously, these are the plans of the government. So they already commissioned some works. They chose the location, and they got a company from America on board, Westinghouse. This is the name of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But well, they don't have a deal. So what is this firm doing in Poland? It's basically doing some preparation works, whatever that means. So some legal reports, expertise, stuff like that, permitting process. But, anytime they can say, we are withdrawing because there is no deal. And the thing is that in our budget, in our state budget, there's 5 billion zlotys. So it's over $1 billion each year planned for this preparation phase. So that's a goose bring the golden eggs for such companies, because with no obligation to build, they can extract billions of dollars from many countries around the world. Isn't it a great business model? So I'm in favor of private small nuclears. Big ones are cool as well, but there is a lot of public taxpayer money waste around them, I believe.
Speaking of the public, so what is the public calling for? Are they saying build the nuclear reactor already?
Yeah, Poles are very in favor.
Yeah.
Poles don't mind, really.
Mhm.
So even, there is this phrase, not in my backyard.
Yes.
So they say, well, build it there, build it in my backyard. I don't care. We want to have lower energy prices. So
Yes,
they
that's
are
the
very open.
YIMBY
Yeah,
culture.
yeah.
Well, we like that. Well, on that positive note, we know that the energy market will move forward no matter what, even with all those barriers, as you showed. Private interests are involved in at least 70% of the energy systems throughout this region, and it's sure to grow with the different types of technology rolling off. I think the technology will pull the government forward, and that's something that we can all look forward to.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much. Here, I'm going to call up my presentation one final time, so that anyone who wants to see our contact information, the Warsaw Enterprise Institute can be reached at the URL below, wei.org.pl/en/homepage/ for those of you who are speaking English. And if you would like some information on how to join our monthly online meeting to hear regular updates on energy policies such as this, please visit the Tholos Foundation at tholosfoundation.org, THOLOS foundation.org. The Grace Richardson Fund and the Climate and Freedom International Coalition, we can be reached at climateandfreedom.org. And most of our historical research since 2016 can be found at gracerichardsonfund.org. The president of the Grace Richardson Fund is Rod Richardson, and his email address is rod@gracerichardsonfund.org. I'm Elizabeth Halliday, Chief Operating Officer. I try to put events together. Please let us know if you'd like to be added to our email list, and I can be reached at halliday@gracerichardsonfund.org. And for those of you listening, and I'll submit this to LinkedIn and a few other places, the Zoom recording will be posted on our website when available, and I'll be able to transfer that to our YouTube channel, which shows information from some of our past events. Thank you very much from the Climate and Freedom International Coalition. We hope to see you soon. And thanks very much to the Climate Group for putting on Climate Week NYC and all that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly.
Okay, Sebastian, we'll see you soon. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Signing
Bye-bye.
off, Climate Week 2024.
Bye.
Bye.